Chapter 20, the work on man-animals and man-computers. Can we tolerate the manipulations that blur the gap between animal and man? Gerald Leach, author of The Biocrats. We now come to two particularly exotic concepts for modifying man. They involve the physical union of man in varying degrees with animals and computers. I will avoid science fiction projections and speak only of laboratory developments and discussions by scientists in good standing. Science, the Journal of the American Association for Advancement of Science, recently had an article entitled A Computer Under Your Hat. It was based on a report to the 1976 annual meeting of the AAAS, as for man-animal mixtures. They now exist as a very small living creatures in many laboratories. Joshua Lederberg has observed that there is enormous scientific interest in organisms augmented by fragments of the human chromosome set. A hybrid of man and animals, often called a chimera. In Greek mythology, a chimera was a fabulous creature with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. It spat fire. In modern biology, a chimera is any living structure in which the chromosomes of different species are combined. Often there is a human component. The biological chimera doesn't spit fire, but it has a tendency to inflame imaginations. This is especially true if the man-animal hybrid is called a subhuman. Its creation only became possible that of an artificially fertilized embryo and the clone. With the development of the new techniques for manipulating tiny fragments of life under a microscope, manipulations require a steadiness of movement beyond the capability of a human hand, usually are handled by powered micromanipulators. Why would anyone, you may wonder, want to mess around combining elements of man, the glory of the creation, with those lesser animals? Well, there is that compelling factor, scientific curiosity. Could primates be made even brighter if their chromosomes were mixed with human ones? There is already real value of using hybrid cells as tracers and studying genetic defects in very early human development. Some scientists feel that man and beast could benefit mutually by swapping desirable traits. James Nagle mentions as a theoretical example the possibility that a liver trait found in animals might improve human liver function. Certain elements of human body chemistry might help one or another domestic animal perform more efficiently or produce longer. The general concept is that each might move toward perfectibility with help from the other. Scientists at present can do a great deal of exploring of man-animal combinations as long as they stay away from producing subhumans. Any man-made creatures that looked or acted like humans would probably create an uproar. But gradually, it is speculated people would get used to them. A panel of scientists convened by the RAND Corporation, a research organization, guessed that the routine production of specialized human mutants might come by the year 2025. That would be within the lifetimes of many of us. Such parahumans might be designed to serve a variety of functions. They might be trained to be the sewer workers and stoop laborers that are now becoming increasingly hard to procure in the Western world. They might be kept in closed areas as sources of organs for transplants. If we come to using animals as surrogate mothers during pregnancy, as previously discussed, they might be modified with human input to function better. Man-animal hybrids might be given a body chemistry more congenial to the normal gestation in a human womb. The technology for mixing different species of animals, including man, is still mostly in the test tube. As of this writing, the following achievements, among others, have been announced in the literature. Man and mouse cells have been fused with the help of the Sendai virus. As already indicated, the mouse nuclei tends to take charge because of their faster maturing rate. There are studies in which the human nucleus has taken charge, but only because the nucleus of the mouse cell was removed beforehand. In plant life, hybrids created by cell fusion have grown to full maturity. In a number of instances, the body cells of man and ape have grown together in cell cultures. Human cells have been combined with the chromosomes from a large number of the other animals. At Erasmus University, Rotterdam, a series of time-lapse photographs have shown the early embryos of a mouse and rat emerging into a large ball-like blastocyst, young embryo. Tiny human organs from fetuses, lungs, kidneys, testes, ovaries, and the pancreas have been inserted into the abdominal walls of mice and have quadrupled in size. This occurred at the Pathological Anatomical Institute in Copenhagen. The biologist Jean Rostand has cited work being undertaken to incorporate human tissue into an ape. Obviously, we are still some way from the predictions of reputable scientists that living specimens of genuine man-animal hybrids will be achieved. We are apparently quite a way from a donkey with a vaguely human facial expression. We are quite a way from an ape man that can turn bolts on an assembly line for 7 hours a day. A generation from now, those scientists enthusiastic about the idea have indeed engineered man-ape hybrids. How are we going to treat them? Will they be entitled to the same legal protection we are? Or will we treat them in the way some societies have treated human slaves, that is, as less than human? In Zaire, for example, certain Africans are having trouble accepting the official view that pygmies of Zaire are human beings. Gerald Leach has summed up neatly the dilemma we may face with this prediction. If a man-animal hybrid is produced, we will keep it in a zoo or a laboratory, not our homes, and pay to see it and embarrass ourselves. But it might embarrass us more than we can stand. Biologists working in this area should perhaps consider the myth of the Minotaur, the bull man that had to be locked in a labyrinth because it was too awful to gaze upon. A large part of the embarrassment might arise in trying to decide what really is human. We think we know, but do we? A number of human conceits might be shaken. What are the boundaries of humanness? What characteristics made the human species unique on this planet? Remember, the gamut of humans runs from aborigines to atomic scientists. I have collected from a number of published lists traits that are supposed to be exclusively human and that set us apart. Man is the only animal with a brain capacity of more than 800 cubic centimeters. This superior brain capacity it is thought, accounts for man's wit and wisdom. The statement is untrue. Many dolphins have bigger brains than many humans, and it seems to be remarkably fast learners. John Lilly, a longtime student of dolphins and the founder of Human Dolphin Foundation in the United States, contends that large-brained dolphins are quite as intelligent as humans, but by necessity exhibit their intelligence in different ways. Within their society, he says, they are more intelligent than humans. Lilly finds that they have a philosophy, an ethic, and a social sensitivity to each other and to the other species, humans included, that we may not achieve in 1,000 years. Man is the only animal that makes long-term plans. What about squirrels gathering nuts for the winter? So what if they are more instinctively driven than humans? And what about the fact that billions of humans seem to live only from day to day? Man is the only rational, reasoning animal. This assumes an ability to analyze and think out problems systematically. What about the raccoons that can escape intricate puzzle boxes invented by a psychologist? They have escaped from boxes requiring the mastery of 7 different kinds of precise actions, simple instinct. Or what about rats that have outperformed college students in solving maze problems? Rats, like Willie, ambitious corporate middle managers, seem to have a specialized maze brightness because they spend so much of their lives figuring out ways to get to the cheese. And what about the beavers that cut down specific types of trees and lug them or their branches hundreds of feet or to streams or rivers? They must battle rushing currents to put the branches in a position exactly right for the dam building. Some beaver dams are 15 feet wide, some 250 feet wide. Thus, the beavers can't just be working by route. And the dam themselves are of no interest to the beavers per se. The beavers build them as long-term projects to force a rise in the water level. The water level must rise high enough to permit them to have secure, moated homes behind the dams. Just programmed behavior? Perhaps so, but a lot of decision-making would seem to be required. Man is the only animal that can make and use tools. Chimpanzees have some capacity to do both. They break branches to the right size and use them for tools or weapons. They throw stones at enemies. They can sweep floors, hammer nails, drive many cars accurately to destinations hundreds of yards away. Man is the only animal living in a context of time. This one is ridiculous. Regardless of the time of year, my family's dog knows when 3:45 p.m. arrives. That is one of his feeding times, and he has a fit if we are 10 minutes late. And what about some humans? Many people in the world seem, in Western eyes, to be unconcerned about time and to be undependable about being on time. Their efforts to adopt Western ways have become symbolized by the wristwatch. Man is the only animal that uses symbols. Chimpanzees may not have invented symbols, but they certainly can use them. A token economy system, which behavioral psychologists have developed to motivate humans, was derived from token systems developed by animal experimenters back in the 1940s. Chimps quickly comprehended that if you work hard for a few hours and earn 10 chips, the chips can be turned in for a bunch of grapes. Man is the only animal with the potential for communicating within the species. Dolphins seem to have an intricate communication system based on sounds, and it has now been discovered that chimps can learn to communicate with humans in the sign language definite mutes use. To do this, they have learned hundreds of human words or word symbols. Sign language is necessary because chimps lack a human voice box and therefore can't speak the words they have learned. A female gorilla at Stanford University has a sign language vocabulary of 300 words. Man is the only animal with a sense of responsibility. What egotistical nonsense. What about the mother moose, a terror to men wandering in northern woodlands when she is guarding her calf? What about German shepherd watchdogs? Man is the only animal that exhibits awareness, self-consciousness. It is true that man is strong on this. Lately, he has exhibited an orgy of awareness. Guidebooks to self-understanding and autobiographies full of methods for self-examination have in recent years glutted the bestseller nonfiction list, but we don't really know that awareness is unique to man. Acting elephants certainly show awareness that death is approaching. Aging elephants certainly show awareness that death is approaching. They travel miles to be near elephant graveyards. Man is the only animal with imagination. A man or a woman, unlike animals, can form mental images of what is not present or has never actually been personally experienced. Possibly so. We just don't know enough about what goes on in the minds of bright animals or of many primitive people. I won't get into the contention that man is the only animal with a soul, since the existence of the soul is hotly argued over even among humans. There are some things we can say for sure about the uniqueness of man. He is the only animal that is at present clearly looks like a man. He is the only mammal that is a full-fledged biped and has an efficient opposable thumb. He is the only animal that usually wears clothes instead of hair. Feathers, scales, and a leather-like skin are a protective shell. He has a unique complement of 46 chromosomes. However, even here, Lederberg points out, no more than a small percent of the total genetic units in a human egg differentiates the human being from the ape. The line between primitive humans and neighboring apes is real, but not always awesome. We are on much safer ground if we define man in terms of what certain of his representatives are capable of doing. Some humans can impose symphonies, invent pocket calculators, write books of poetry, paint great murals, keep records, invent clocks, build cathedrals and great bridges, fly spaceships, make 9-layer cakes, design skyscrapers that won't fall down, or invent strapless gowns that won't fall down either. Best of all, we have some wonderful humans with a deep capacity for caring about their fellow humans and for working with dedicated selflessness to improve the condition of the species. That indeed is a distinctively human capability. The only point I am making in all of this is that chimeras offer the possibility to erode further man's sense of dignity and uniqueness. This process of erosion, which started with the findings of Copernicus, has continued down through Darwin and Freud to the most recent findings or proposals of B.F. Skinner and Joshua Lederberg. Shall we, through our ingenious manipulations, continue the erosion by creating subhuman chimeras just because it is possible? Nagel suggests correctly, I think, that true subhumans with visible human characteristics would create moral and ethical questions of enormous magnitude. The prospect is that we are going to see more and more chimeras created with a human component. Some may be man-size. That is still another reason why it is urgent that each modern nation set up a commission on human reproductive research. The only possible justification I can see for creating subhumans is for medical research and organ transplants. Subhumans should never, ever become a part of the public human scene. On creating the man-computer. The advances of medical technologists in mechanizing the human body will be examined shortly. Here I will focus on one development of spectacular that, like chimeras, it could make a fundamental change in human identity. I refer to the plans for wedding the living human brain and the man-made computer. This involves something quite different from building a mechanical robot that walks, lifts, and, for decoration, has mental head with vague human features or robot arms strapped to human arms. It also involves something quite different from the handsome man in the TV series $6 Million Man. This fictional character has been engineered in vaguely explained ways to perform superhuman muscular feats. It also involves something quite different from the comparable female in the TV Wonder Person spinoff, The Bionic Woman. The man-computer, in short, involves modifying and enhancing the brain by computer. Reading the mind electronically by computer will be easier than feeding the mind electronically. Some computer link-ups with the brain will be less formidable than others. A small computer that can recognize abnormal brainwave activity, as noted, is already being perfected. It may be implanted inside the head. When it recognizes an abnormality, it triggers a reaction that smooths out the brain waves. Mind reading of sorts. With a computer that records brainwave patterns, you can know in advance how a person is going to react to a question or a problem and take action. John Hanley of the Brain Research Institute at the University of California, Los Angeles, found that such mind reading was possible with chimpanzees. A chimp named Jerry was taught to play tic-tac-toe. The game can usually be mastered by humans only after the age of 4 or 5. Once Jerry had mastered the game, Hanley's group planted electrodes in his brain. These were to record the brainwave activity while he decided what move to make next. They restricted their observations to times when he had a chance to make a winning move that would complete a row. To their surprise and delight, they found that they could tell at least 15 seconds before he made a move whether he would be correct or incorrect. Their forecasts were right 99% of the time. All aspects of Jerry's brainwave pattern showed more activity if he was about to make an error. Even when the brainwave recorders were simply placed on the outside of Jerry's scalp, the predictions were 70% right. More sensitive instruments presumably could improve the rate of correct predictions. Hanley suspected that Jerry's brain had to be in a certain state for him to arrive at the correct move. This work of Hanley's had led to surmises that in the future airplane pilots should wear brainwave attachments that would ring a bell if the pilot's mind was not in the right state to start a critical maneuver. How many times have we read reports that an accident was due to pilot error? Another suggestion is that students at the consoles of computerized teaching machines could wear brainwave recorders. These would give the machine 10 seconds notice when the student was about to make a wrong answer. In that time, a lightning swift computer would easily rephrase the question or switch to a slightly easier one. This in turn would give the student a euphoric sense of brightness and perhaps help motivate him to be an enthusiastic student. Minds that move matter. Lawrence R. Pinio, a 48-year-old neurophysiologist with a bushy white beard at the Stanford Research Institute, had long yearned to be able to write as fast as he could think. Could he do it by thinking into a computer? Some idea. He still cannot write as fast as he can think, but after a 2-year experiment, he has proved that you can think into a computer and that the instructions you think can cause the computer to activate and move remote control cameras or other machines. In short, the machines obey your mental instructions. Pinio started with the motor theory of thought. This holds that verbal thinking is nothing more than subvocal speech. With a number of subjects, he attached electrodes to the area of the scalp near the region where speech originates. On command, they were to think of a word such as schoolboy or start or left. They were to repeat the word in their minds 10 times. All this thinking of words was being registered by a computer. It averaged out a recognition pattern for each word. He proceeded to build up a vocabulary of 15 unspoken English words that the computer could recognize. He trained the computer to recognize actually spoken words, overt speech, as well as think words, covert speech. They came out much alike in the word patterns that the computer stored away. In his pioneering effort, he was successful more than half the time in getting think words classified properly into the computer. With some subjects, the success rate ran as high as 70%. With spoken words, he had 100% success. In his preliminary report, Pineo stated, "We can conclude that it is feasible for a human verbally to communicate both overtly and covertly with the computer using biological information alone with a high degree of accuracy and reliability, at least with a small vocabulary." This is interesting as an exercise in scientific versatility, but what would the practical applications be? Assuming that 100% accuracy is achieved with much larger vocabulary of words that were only thought, not spoken, there seems to be very little chance of improving upon the tape recorder and typewriter in recording thoughts. It could reduce the crews needed to man the cameras and lights in television or motion picture studios. But what could it do in activating most machines that cannot already be done by pushing buttons on a panel? There's speculation that people could drive cars or airplanes just by thought control. I would still feel better if someone had his hands on the controls. Perhaps the best practical use would be in a surreptitious situations. Bank tellers ordered by robbers not to make a move could think that the word that would activate the alarm. An executive who wanted to end a wearisome interview and could not reach the hidden button could mentally summon a secretary. She would accept the signal as a cue to remind him about some other appointment or commitment. Machine to mind education or indoctrination. It is possible that eventually the Pineo procedure could be put into reverse. Perhaps the same electrophysiological signals that form words in the mind could somehow be programmed into a computer that fed back to the mind. There are hundreds of thousands of words, but all can be broken down into a few dozen units of sound. Memory seems to be acquired electronically, even though it apparently gets stored chemically. Is automatic learning possible without conscious participation? If signals are fed into specific neuronal structures, Pineo has at least speculated on the possibility of using cybernetic communication to help a child's learning process. Imagine the revolution in education if students could learn without the enormous bother of studying. Some informed people talk of the possibility of computerized machines that could imprint in our brains in hours information otherwise might take days or weeks of learning. Science fiction stuff? Of course, you might end up with even more Johnnies than we already have, who, after a dozen of years of schooling, can't write two successive coherent sentences. Learning to write correctly and clearly is much more than a memory exercise. Throughout the world, it is an exercise for disciplining oneself to think clearly. Writing is a method not only for the expression of one's thought, but for the formulating of them as well. The computer is part of the brain. The 1976 meeting of the American Association for Advancement of Science, as mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, a session on the possibility of incorporating a memory-enhancing computer into the brain. It was described as a fascinating session. A compact computer would serve as a booster to the brain of man. It would be tuned into the brain's own electrochemical language and would both receive and send out information. As projected, it would help the mind function faster and greatly expand the brain's capacity for reliable memory. The discussion was launched by Adam V. Reed, a young psychologist at Rockefeller University. He has been doing work on a first step towards this dramatic innovation. That first step is deciphering the brain's internal language. It seems that animal studies are beginning to yield clues on neural coding and on the brain's pattern of processing information. The goal, Reed said, would be a tie-up of mind and computer that will have the information right in your head instantly. Whenever you think you want to know something, the computer in the head would become a natural part of the person's brain. Physically, he said, it would require making contact with natural neurons for both input and output without the interfering with their normal operation. Achieving such a brain booster, he conceded, will take some doing. He thought it could be done within 50 years, or within lifetimes of many millions of people now alive in the Western world. 5 formidable problems must be solved. We must refine at least tenfold the already amazing miniaturization of thin wire electrodes. We must learn vastly more about how to get computerized information into the brain. We must locate the neurons in the brain that are the best ones to use in making hookups with electrodes. We must learn the brain's internal language so that they can be used by the computer. We must unravel in detail the secret of how information gets stored as memory, as in later retrieved. None of the scientists present hooted at the feasibility of Reed's ideas. Some expressed skepticism or thought such a tie-up to a computer would take a very long time. However, John McCarthy, a computer expert at Stanford University, said, if fully successfully done, this would constitute a complete evolutionary jump in the species. He seemed to like the idea, for he added, fundamentally, it is something that can't be suppressed. Reed was questioned about the possible abuses that might arise from such a mind-computer marriage under a totalitarian regime. Would it open up possibilities of thought control, indoctrination, and even memory tapping? Reed dismissed these speculations, I think rather naively, by saying, those who work in the field would simply shut off the availability of that technology. Many scientists under Stalin and Hitler may have been unhappy and may have dragged their feet, but most did not simply shut off their know-how on atomic energy, rocket building, eavesdropping, or brainwashing. They tried to reach accommodation with the regime. Sometimes they succumbed to the threat of imprisonment. Sometimes the lure of favored treatment seemed too strong to resist. On the other hand, a populace, even under a dictator, probably would not put up with any universal program to put computers in their heads. Almost certainly they would not permit it unless it was done under the promise of brain enhancement. Reed said that a brain-computer hookup would be a great thing to have as long as it was under one's own personal control. A practical matter, the cost of constructing and implanting the computers, if they are even perfected, would be so high that only the rich or the government could afford them. The government might allocate them to people who work under pressure, who must have many facts available for instant recall. Astronauts, for instance, are secretaries of state or managers of atomic energy plants. For computers left over might go to sportscasters who could brighten their chatter by mentioning how many times Johnny Unitas ran the football on fourth down in 1966. This terms of manipulations, ethics, and social hazard, the man-computers seem substantially less worrisome than man-animals. There wouldn't be the monstrosities to cope with. The computer link-up would be made after birth, not before. Presumably, its installation would require the consent of the wearer, who would also have the option of deciding when he wanted it removed. If computers that feed the mind ever become widely available, they could conceivably contribute to the serious depersonalization of man that we are already witnessing. Individuality might suffer because of problems of evaluation. Professors wouldn't know if they were grading a man or a machine. And there would be problems of sizing up new acquaintances. If a cocktail party an attractive new neighbor alluded to Akbar, the Mughal emperor cited Cato, what would we conclude? Was she unusually well read, or was she simply trying out some new information fed to her the night before while she was asleep? Chapter 21, Resetting the Clocks in Our Bodies. By 1990, we will know of experimentally tested way of slowing down age changes in man that offers an increase of 20% in lifespan. Alex Comfort, British gerontologist. Comfort pointed out that the rate of aging in laboratory animals can be altered by relatively simple manipulations. Looking slightly further over the horizon to the year 2000, California gerontologist Bernard Strahler states that by then the human lifespan may be increased by 10 to 30 years if sufficient money and talent are devoted to reaching that goal. His maximum figure was to take the average life expectancy beyond 100 years. The manufacturers of light bulbs know almost exactly to within a few hours how long a light bulb will burn. Similarly, manufacturers of radios and other products can gauge how long the product will last with average use, give or take a few weeks. In the trade, these expectancies are referred to matter-of-factly as death dates. Even the best product cannot last forever if it depends on moving parts or energy. It usually has a known death date. Death dates of products can be and have been manipulated for maximum profitability. Living creatures have death dates too. There are maximum expectancies and average expectancies. Few reach maximum expectancies for a variety of reasons. Golden hamsters never live longer than 3 years. Dogs never live longer than 30 years. Horses have a maximum of 50 years. The champion in longevity is not the brainy one, man, but the giant tortoise, if sometimes live 180 years. Man comes in so many varieties and lives in such varied conditions of environment and wear and tear that is misleading to give one death date for him. As of today, the human biological clock or clocks appear to set in such a way that human life ends before 120 years have elapsed, usually much before. A few humans have apparently lived longer than 120 years, though verification is difficult because birth records were not kept in many parts of the world until a century ago. But the practical maximum of 120 years is 30 years longer than all but a few remarkably hardy people can expect to live. Since we are dealing with billions of individuals, it is probably better to think of human death dates in terms of average life expectancies. Even here, we get across gross variations. In the United States in 1976, the life expectancy of males at birth was approximately 68 years. Women lived about 8 years longer. Their expectancy at birth is now almost 76. The figure for males is about the same as that for males in Germany, Canada, Great Britain, and slightly above that for Russian males. Note some of the extreme variations in life expectancies by countries as given in the list below. The figures are based on the United Nations data of life expectancies for males at birth. Guinea, years 26, the lowest reported. Afghanistan, years 38. Burma, years 46. Turkey, years 54. France, 68 years. Sweden, 72 years, the highest reported. Presumably, the prevalence of disease and malnutrition of severity of environment account largely for the great differences in expectancy. Of the 7 countries listed in which the life expectancy of males at birth exceeds 70 years, only 2 are outside Northern Europe, Japan and Israel. For Americans, the 20% increase in lifespan projected by Alex Comfort would take expectancies up to about 82 years for males and 91 for females. That would be quite a jump, especially since the life expectancy of Americans has been at a standstill for a quarter century. Expectancy may even be declining now because of pollution, unsound nutrition, and the increase of smoking among women. For hundreds of years, individual humans, by the billions, have yearned for an increase in longevity, not for other people necessarily, but for themselves. They have invested in magic elixirs, in pulverized bull testicles, in monkey glands. In recent years, one of the more popular alleged regenerators goes by the name of cell therapies. It has been widely tried in Europe. Patients, including world celebrities, have paid hundreds of dollars to have a fluid based on cell extracts from unborn lambs pumped into their buttocks. Some claim they felt peppier afterward. The explanations advanced for how or why the treatment should work have often been vague and contradictory. Few scientists take it seriously. Comfort blasted pseudo-medical techniques based on cell extracts. Another alleged life expander that is popular in some foreign countries and has several scientific supporters in the United States is a ruminarian drug known as Gerovital. It does not, at this writing, have the blessing of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Many of the world's wealthy people journey to a Romanian spa for a course of treatments. The main ingredient is procaine hydrochloride. If Gerovital does perchance have any life-expanding effect, it would apparently be through its action in inhibiting an enzyme believed to influence the brain's hypothalamus, the major regulatory center. Why human bodies wear out. Age, Comfort says, is the only disease we have all got, but scientists cannot wholly agree on what we have got. The once popular watch spring theory that the body just runs down because our energy decreases is generally rejected. Some think aging is caused by massive destruction of cells. Certainly that occurs. Some think the major cause is that genetic material starts to wear out or becomes blurred. Others believe immunological defenses start crumbling. Still others that the endocrine glands set up a drop off in instructions from the brain and start slowing down their functioning. And surely for individuals, genetic inheritance is at least partially involved. Longevity does tend to run in families. Whatever the specific cause is, aging in the biological terms is, in Comfort's words, the increasing inability of the body to maintain itself and perform the operations it once did. With age, waxy deposits resulting from degeneration of bodily tissues start accumulating between the cells, and fatty deposits start showing up inside the cells. After the age of 30, our muscle cells start dying off. If we reach 90 years of age, they have usually decreased by 1/3. Muscle cells like brain, kidney, and nerve cells do not renew themselves. In many people at around age of 30, the brain's nerve cells start dying off about 100,000 a day. This is not as ominous as it sounds, because at that rate, it would take 273 years for the supply of nerve cells to be exhausted. The age of the average person has lost perhaps 14% of these cells, but he still has about 8.5 billion cells left, far more than he needs in order to function. By the age of 70, a person has lost perhaps a fourth of the tiny urinary tubes of the kidneys that carry away waste from the blood, and the 70-year-old has lost at least half of his taste buds. One of the more startling discoveries about aging was made by the microbiologist Leonard Hayflick in 1961, while he was at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia. Up to then, scientists had commonly believed that most body cells, except those of the brain, nerves, muscles, and kidneys, would double by division indefinitely if kept in a proper culture. It turned out that the only cells with this capacity are cancer cells. Hayflick found that there is a maximum number of times that ordinarily body cells will double by division in culture. For humans, it is about 50 times. He took cells from tissue of a 4-month-old aborted human fetus and put it in a culture. The cells multiplied about 50 times and then died within a few months. The cells divided vigorously at first, then gradually slowed down and divided very slowly as the 50th division approached. Inside a living body, a division is at much slower pace. The figure of 50 divisions may apply only to cells in culture. Hayflick later took cells from a lung of a human 20-year-old. In culture, these cells divided about 20 times and stopped. He found that if he froze cells at, say, the 15th division, action stopped until they were thawed. When thawed, the cells went on and divided about 35 more times. Each species of animals he tested had its own maximum number of divisions in culture. Mouse cells divided about 12 times and stopped. The scientific world at first took an incredulous view of Hayflick's reports. Skeptics can still be found. However, his findings have been replicated in other laboratories and are now widely accepted as rough norm for the division of human cells in culture under normal conditions. Perhaps the cells contain a kind of clock that runs down at a predetermined rate, and perhaps the cell clock is only one of several kinds of clocks in the body. In 1975, Bioscience carried opinions by some leading researchers that the body might have a master clock or pace setter in the brain, perhaps in the hypothalamus. If there is a master clock, it would appear to have the power to override the cell division clock. Evidence of this is what happens to the age of ovaries when they are transplanted to younger or older females. Experimenters have taken from old female rat ovaries that had stopped cycling and have transplanted them in young rats. The ovaries then began cycling again, and the young ovaries transplanted to old female rats stopped cycling. One of the problems scientists have to cope with in their efforts to lengthen lifespan is time. They don't like to wait 15 or 40 years, that is, until their subjects die, to get verification of their theories. Ways are being found to assess success or failure on the basis of a segment of subject's lifespan, to develop data and that will enable such segments to be used. Scientists at the Gerontology Research Center of the U.S. National Institute of Health are establishing baselines of normal aging rates. About 650 healthy men of various ages that have, over the years, been given periodically about 80 tests. These are biochemical, psychological, clinical, physiological. They measure variables known to reflect aging: grip strength, skin elasticity, heart and kidney function, amount of cholesterol, maximum breathing capacity, fluid pressure in the eye, problem-solving ability, memory, and the like. Computers can tell whether any one individual in the experiment is remaining more or less youthful than would normally be expected. Scientists are investigating several possibilities for making significant changes in the human lifespan. Some of them would be more pleasant than others. Here are several approaches being made to lengthen life in a major way. Lower food intake. Scientists are finding that in a variety of animals, a restricted diet can lengthen life by as much as 50%. The animals in some of the experiments tend to be smaller than normal. That might suggest that if we applied such dieting to humans, the average height might drop a few inches. But what would be wrong with that if the drop was widespread? Large body size is no longer particularly functional except in athletes and steelworkers. Rats given normal diets but not fed every third day extend their life expectancy by about 20%. But would reduced food intake leave us feeling chronically hungry? Apparently not necessarily. Two researchers, one from Rijks University, Netherlands, and the other from the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, let 121 rats eat all they wanted. The rats were divided into three groups. Each group got a diet with a different protein calorie balance, but they were all offered heaping amounts. It turned out that some rats just naturally ate a lot less than other rats throughout life. Some lived 3 times as long as others. There was a clear tendency for the lean eaters to live longer. Overeating during adolescence particularly shortened life. If someone wanting a long life were to alter his diet according to these test results, he would eat a diet strong in proteins early in life and a diet light in proteins after 50. Whether the results will, in fact, apply to humans has not, at this writing, been fully tested. The cooling approach. There is considerable evidence from animal studies that a slight lowering of body temperature greatly extends the lifespan. The studies suggest that lowering the body temperature even a few degrees Fahrenheit might, in humans, add decades of healthful life. Cooling slows down the rate of chemical reactions, but can cooling be done with humans and without making us shiver perpetually? To slow down bodily processes during and after surgery, hospitals occasionally lower the body temperature a few degrees. They do it by wrapping the patient in a hypothermic blanket with circulating cold water. Patients can tolerate the blanket for a few days, but it is not something practical or desirable to use indefinitely. But perhaps the normal body temperature can be changed. Scientists say there may be nothing immutable about 98.6 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius. The dangling human testes, the organ that helps assure the continuity of our species, requires a temperature several degrees below the normal temperature if the sperms are to function properly. The body temperature of hibernating mammals drops down just above freezing. All the change does is put them into a deep sleep. The heartbeat slows about 6 strokes a minute. What exactly happens is still not clear. It is known that if you inject the blood of a hibernating squirrel into the bloodstream of a housed squirrel that is not hibernating, the housed squirrel will soon fall into a deep sleep resembling hibernation. 2 studies of body cooling are of special interest, but involve efforts to reset the thermostats of mammals to produce a cooler body without discomfort. And both are based on the probability that thermostatic control resides in one region of the hypothalamus in the brain. As indicated earlier, the hypothalamus may contain the body's master clock. At Purdue University Laboratory of Neuropsychology, Robert D. Meyer and colleagues have succeeded in producing prolonged rises and falls of as much as 10 degrees in the body temperature of monkeys and cats. To obtain the temperature rises, they perfuse the critical area of the hypothalamus with sodium ions. To obtain the cooling, they used calcium ions. Apparently, they achieved a resetting of the set point of the body thermostats. Animals did not appear to suffer either acute fever or chills. The problem of this approach, from the standpoint of widespread human applicability, is that it involves implanting a slender and tubular shaft into the brain through which to deliver the ions. And the flow of ions must be regulated by a tiny pump. The second approach is being made at the Michigan State University by a team of biophysicists headed by Barnett Rosenberg. This group first had considerable success in greatly prolonging life by cooling the body temperature of so-called cold-blooded animals. In these animals, body temperature tends to coincide with the temperature of the air outside their bodies. Now the team has turned to warm-blooded mammals, which of course have thermostats determining a fixed body temperature. Rosenberg told me, "We have found a drug which in our preliminary testing is capable of turning off the thermostat for significant periods of time without deleterious side effects in mice. These chemicals can be given orally or injected into the blood. The drug used, he said, is so common that he will not at this time reveal it out of fear that people might start using it incautiously. He revealed the name to me, and I can understand why he is cautious. He indicated that in due course the name will be published. The drug turns off the thermostat instead of resetting it so that bodily temperature drops to that of the surrounding air. If humans whose thermostat had been turned off were in an outdoor temperature below about 80 degrees, his heart would start fibrillating. At present, Barnett's group has colonies of mice living in incubators where temperatures are fixed at various levels. The mice get an injection every other day and it turns off their thermostats for about 20 hours. The animals have become lighter in weight than those in the control groups, and if earlier findings hold, they will live longer. In Rosenberg's opinion, for complete success with humans, resetting of the thermostat would need to be permanent and at any desired level. He is planning to work in that direction. He has provided me with charts showing what might be achieved in lengthening the human lifespan by body cooling if finding from animal tests proved valid for humans. If a white American male with a median life expectancy had his thermostat reset downward soon after birth by approximately 4 degrees Fahrenheit, he would probably live to be 100. If the thermostat were reset down by 8 degrees, he would probably live to be 140. Neither Rosenberg nor Myers indicated that the cooling feats have performed any serious side effects on animals treated. The drops in temperature were too small to approach hibernation. Still, until tests have been performed on humans, one must wonder whether long-term cooling might make the human subjects languid, drowsy, or even if the drops were big enough, stuporous.